Sanjeev Sanyal, these are some numbers. Contend with these. According to him, at least 72 million people are precariously placed in the economy as far as jobs go. Now, they might be underemployed, they might be, doing jobs which are not of a kind that are productive in any which way, what have you. But there is this problem. This budget hasn't addressed that. And most importantly, the health spend has been stagnant, despite this being a once-in-a-century pandemic. And it is anti-poor for the reasons that he sort of enunciated. Sanyal.
So thank you for having me on your show. Let me take on, first of all, a point that Mr. Iyer had made in the beginning, that notes are being printed in order to try and pump up the economy. First of all, this is a empirically verifiable fact. All you need to do is to go and look at whether or not money supply growth is spiraling out. And you'll very clearly be able to see that money supply growth has been, if anything, very restrained. I mean, perhaps this may be happening in the US and other countries, but in India, certainly the Reserve Bank has held money supply growth in a very restrained way. So this idea of going out there and printing large amounts of notes is actually factually incorrect. Now, to come to some of the other issues, absolutely, job creation is a major issue. This is not a new thing. Job creation has been a major issue for a very long time, and certainly going through 2 years of the pandemic hasn't helped. And as you will remember, in the economic survey that I presented yesterday, I did point out that specifically in the case of contact-intensive services, economic activity has not come back to the levels they were pre-COVID, and certainly an area where some effort needs to be put. And you saw that in the budget. We did put in 50,000 crores in there to try and support, for example, specifically the hospitality sector. But in the end, what matters in order to create jobs is got to be growth. This is absolutely critical. I'm not a great believer in this theory of jobless growth. At the very least, growth is a necessary condition for generating jobs. And so that is what we are trying to focus on here. And how do you do that, given all the various other constraints? Well, we have clearly opted to go for infrastructure spending as a very important driver of that growth. So infrastructure spending has gone up. Incidentally, there is more than adequate evidence that infrastructure spend, which this government incidentally has repeatedly shown that it's capable of delivering on, that this kind of spending generates jobs. It is the fastest way of generating second and third order benefits to demand. It is also creates assets. That's absolutely critical, because unlike many other kinds of demand creation, this leaves behind a productive asset. So all of this put together, this is, in our view, given the very constraints, the best trade-off that can be made. I don't think it's a very large gamble at all. I mean, obviously, we live in an uncertain world,
Sanyal,
so we
the
have to adjust
criticism
to all
is that
kinds
you're
of
looking
things,
at a,
whether there's geopolitical tensions.
You're looking at a virtuous cycle to fructify over a few years. The needs are immediate. There are people who've lost jobs in the immediate. There are statistics that are being quoted by Dr. Mehrotra in the immediate.
I think
you yourself in your survey said that Manrega demand,
first of all, this idea
job
that
demand has grown. So why are we seeing a cut in the Manrega allocation, for example? Just an example.
So, first of all, I think this is a completely wrong way of thinking about it. Manrega is demand-driven. So if you put an assumption into the budget, that does not mean that if demand for Manrega pops up, we will not provide it. We will provide it. The number will just go up. So I don't think looking at the budget assumption is a meaningful way of thinking about Manrega, first of all. Secondly, while it is true that Manrega demand, as it stands right now, is a little bit above where it was pre-COVID, it is nowhere near where it was during the peak of the lockdown or even during the second wave. They have come off very significantly from that level. And many other data is showing that jobs are growing, whether you take into account the EPFO data or you take private sector data from even if you take private sector data, which I haven't taken into account in the economic survey, but Team Lease and Naukri.com and other kinds of data, that will also show you. So I think there is more than adequate evidence that there is acceleration in growth, that jobs are being created. Do we need to create more jobs? Absolutely, yes. But the question then is not whether it should be done. The question is, what is the most sensible way of going about it? And the call that we have taken is that infrastructure spend in particular is a good way of triggering the cycle. Now, of course, in the end, you need private investment to also kick in. And for that, let me say, a lot of effort has been put in, for example, to clean up the banks. After many, many years, we have a banking system that is reasonably clean, well capitalized, NPAs are coming down. So as and when demand for funds comes back from the private sector, the banking system is absolutely in a great place to be able to accelerate and support that, the need for credit. So all told, we are in a reasonably good position. By the way, that's not only our sort of assessment.
Yeah.
The IMF came up with a forecast just 3-4 days ago, and it says that India will be the fastest growing economy in the world with 9% GDP growth. Now that is, that's way above my 8 to 8.5% forecast. Or even for that matter, the budget assumption is even more conservative. So if anything, the government is being conservative, not being
expansive,
irresponsible at all.
Okay. Well, look, the last word hasn't been said on this, viewers, and we can very well assume that we'll be back here tomorrow night, because at 11 a.m. tomorrow, viewers, the Prime Minister is going to come out and mount a stiff defense of his budget, of the government's budget, Nirmala Sitharaman's budget, and take on some of the criticism, which is going to throw up, of course, fresh debating points. So be prepared to join us. Thank you very much, all, for being part of this debate. And thank you, viewers, for staying with Times Now all through the day. We'll take a short break. The news are coming up. Don't go away.